Welcome to Books on Air. I'm Suzanne Harris. Books on Air is a series where we do a deep dive into the writer's passion. We talk about why they wrote the book. We talk about what their writing process is like and what they hope their reader will take away from their book. You'll get a real glimpse behind the curtain, if you will. Joining me today is Peter Boaz Jones, and he's here to talk about his award-winning book, The Gospel of the Four, a unique conflation of the four Gospels into a single continuous narrative, explicated by the author's commentary. Peter, welcome.
Hello, Susan.
You know, the book has already won 2 prizes, 2 awards. It's won the 2023 Christian Book Award contest and then the 2023 New York Book Festival Award. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
You know, it always strikes me. Books have birthdays, if you will, and tell 2 stories. The first story is the story that you, the author, have chosen to put into the book to share with the reader. But there's always a story behind that book. There's always a reason that it was created or born, if you will. Tell me about the Gospel of Four and how it came to be.
Well, it came through personal study. I used to study a lot. I've always studied even since I was a teenager, and I suddenly realised that there's a number of miracles in the Gospels, and I've wondered why there were so many miracles. There were so many miracles numbered when Jesus did a lot more miracles. So I decided to check each one and the context that they were written in, and found that there was 42 up to the resurrection. And then I elaborated further, taking in the crucifixion and the Passover and the Ascension, and found there were another, and checked those miracles as well. But when altogether there's 50, if you when Jesus was crucified, that was the 40. When he was resurrected, that was the 43rd miracle. So there were 7 more after that, and 50, of course, is a special number, that's really why I checked all the texts around the miracles. And funny, I can read you. I was going to read you something at the end of the interview, but it's probably best to read it now.
Go ahead.
This particular formulation of the 4 Gospels into one complete whole, with the given explanations of the text in question, including a complete scripture graph, is an attempt to give the answers to the age-old problem of the natural synchronization of the successive events in the 4 Gospels without any of the so-called contradictions, thus producing an entirely new work for those who are seeking answers to some of the seemingly perplexed, anomalous questions that people interested in this field have halted at. Consequently, and hopefully, therefore, it will give the subject the proper credence it had from its original conception when these miraculous events were first written down. Moreover, it will create one natural flowing gospel in combining the 4, but at the same time not taking anything away from the importance of the individuality of each of the authors and their separate books. Of course, I can carry on reading much more, but that sort of sums it up in a nutshell, basically.
Now, this was a challenging book to write. First of all, it's quite a scholarly publication. You have 54 chapters. You have a bibliography. You have an appendices. And the book itself was based on the King James Version, which they call the Authorized Version, but you also went back to the Greek. Do you speak Greek? How did you go back to the Greek, and how did you pull these together? This sounds like a huge task, Peter.
Well, it was. I mean, it took me many years. The thing, I mean, today, I mean, I had all the Greek text, because you can get it on the internet anyway, the whole Greek, with the King James Version underneath each Greek word. So to complete the book, I had to check every Greek word, so that I didn't miss out one Greek word, which the King James Version is based on. And, obviously it took a long time. But as I say, people, you can get the Greek version on the internet now. Anybody can just look at it and check it. And that's basically what I did.
How long did it take?
Well, I mean, I started it in 1982.
Wow.
And it was completed in, I can't remember now, 2000, I think. When I finally got a publisher. But it took me, all those, because I was working, I had a full-time job as well. So I could only do it the weekends and on a odd day off. It took me all that time. Then when I got the first publisher, he went bankrupt on publication. So then I had to, how can I say, I had to figure out how to get another publisher. And luckily enough, Author House got in contact with me at that time. So I went with them, you see. It just took me many years, yeah.
The thing that, as you and I talked before we started the interview, the first question I asked you was, were you a theologian? Were you involved in the church? And we went through a conversation about that. And I think that background would be of interest to our listener. But I want to say that because of that conversation, I understand that you are a true scholar by my definition. You wrote this work because of your own curiosity, and you call it a personal study. This, to me, is scholarly because there's something that you wanted to know, there's something that you wanted to create, and you sat down and you were willing to go through all of the investigation and all of the work to create this book. And that, to me, is the perfect definition of a person who's a scholar. Let's tell our listeners a little bit about, you started becoming interested in this as a teenager. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, my parents, mum and stepfather, they were like kind of quite religious, and some of the things they said, and I didn't always agree with, and I started checking up on things then. I don't want to knock one, religion against another one, because they've all got truth. But I was just interested in some of the things they were saying, and I used to check up. And then, I had to leave home when I was 21, which is probably should have left a lot sooner. But because there was things going on, with the religious aspect. Plus, my mother needed another room anyway. She'd had another baby. And it was time for me to leave. And, how can I say?
You became interested in Judaism.
Yeah, because basically, if one's a Christian, one has to recognize that it's all based on Judaism. Without Judaism, there wouldn't be no Christianity. So therefore, understanding the Old Testament properly is paramount to understanding the New. Though, one can understand the New Testament without the Old Testament in one way, but to get a completer picture, and it depends on one's interest. If one is interested in expanding one's knowledge, then naturally one has to acknowledge that Christianity came from Judaism. Of course, a lot of people wish it didn't, I mean, but that's basically the truth,
In the book, at the very beginning, there is a place where it says what this book reveals. And there are 31 specific points there. Tell me a little bit about those 31 points and how you distilled those down.
Yeah, I was going to read you something about that originally. Then I thought the other parts would be more interesting. How can I say? Is it okay if I read this bit?
Sure.
Read it to you.
Yes, of course.
I had not realised when first starting to write the manuscript any special significance to the numbering of the rest of the miracles, when finding there were 42 miracles up to the resurrection. Nevertheless, afterwards, in 1986, in realising I must combine the other manuscript I was preparing on the events surrounding the resurrection and the including in the ascension, amazing, might have already said this, I suppose, and surprisingly, I found that altogether in all, there were 50 miracles when counting the 42 with the other miracles that follow prior to the ascension. It became clear that indeed there was much significance relating to these findings and predominantly specific new meaning to the way the four texts are basically intrinsically connected together. This also gave rise to the integral quintessence of the importance affiliated to how many of these miracles were chosen by the gospel writers to be included within their narratives of the ministry of Jesus, since many more miracles occurred than those chosen to be recorded. These findings also concur that the events contained in the four Gospels were written in a manner which adhered to a well-informed style in the overall format, specifically and precisely following the successive order in which they had originally transpired, except for five major discolations, which relate primarily to Matthew and his reason for placing them otherwise. As I say, the 31 points are just prominent points which give the interested scholar that should be interesting to check on all that. As I say, it's so complex and easy at the same time. But those are the basic 31 points. But because Matthew is slightly different, I'll read the first point in Matthew. The coming of the Baptist disciples of Jesus the second time at the 18th and 19th, 20th and 21st miracle, along with the conclusion of the final tour of Galilee. The ordination of the 12, which is the second point, is different in Matthew. The narrative of the Sabbath question, the 12th miracle, along with the first council of Pharisees, and Jesus just healing the great crowds in fulfilling of prophecy. The 15th miracle and Jesus' dialogue with the Pharisees, and the anointing of Jesus, the son, the leper. Matthew just slightly puts them in a different position, but there's a reason for that. Anyway, it's timeless trying to mention everything.
Oh, of course. And we really just want to sort of interest our listeners in the book, because, of course, one of the main things we're doing is trying to get them to buy a copy of the book because it is so interesting. And the cover, when they go to Amazon to buy the book, the cover of the book will strike them immediately. It's quite beautiful. It's a deep dark blue, and there's a cross on the front of it. And because of the color, I guess it's because of the maybe it's my computer, I don't know, but the color of the background with the cross almost made it look three-dimensional. Tell me a little bit about how you chose that cover and what its significance is.
Yeah, originally in the first copy, in the first imprint, I'd got the cross exactly the same, but I'd got like rays going out from the cross with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but it confused things more. And Author House, they did they copied a little bit of the first book and enhanced it with the way they've the colours and everything. And that made it stand out.
It's just so striking. It's just beautiful. Did you?
Yeah.
This long, it took you so many years to write the book. As you were writing the book, did you personally experience any kind of revelation about yourself or any kind of revelation that surprised you as you went through this huge effort?
Yeah, I suppose the one not to give up, but it was something. Once I started it, I knew I couldn't stop it, because it was like if I was I'm trying to think of the word. If I was ignoring what was there, and I'd be held accountable. So I had to carry it on until the end. I mean, I'm 80 now, but and it's only got reprinted in 2004. So it's a lifelong work. It kind of split my marriage up in one way. That didn't help. Mind you, she was completely for it, but in the end, how can I say? I spent a lot of money putting it like that. Quite a lot in debt, but it helped me to carry on with it. And as I was saying, once you sort of start something like this, I believe in God, and I thought, well, He's not going to be very happy if I'm kind of being like a Jonah.
Right.
And, so I thought I'd better carry on, otherwise I'm going to suffer.
It really became a calling and a mission, didn't it?
Oh yeah. But yeah.
Well, this is so fascinating, and I know that our listeners are wondering where they can find the book. It is on Amazon, and let me give you the specific title of the book, and then let me do some spelling of Peter's name so that you can find it easily. The title of the book is The Gospel of the Four, a unique conflation of the four Gospels into a single continuous narrative, explicated by the author's commentary. If you put in Amazon and you put in The Gospel of the Four by Peter, Peter, Boaz, Boaz, Jones, Jones. If you get The Gospel of the Four by Peter Boaz Jones, it will come up right there on Amazon. And you can see that extraordinary book cover, and you can click it right below the book cover. There's a place that you can click and read an excerpt from the book, and there's a beautiful excerpt there on Amazon. Now, Peter, I know it's available some other places. Where else could our listeners find the book?
Well, one can find it on Facebook with my name, Peter Boaz Jones. It's on my profile, and one can also read several, 2 or 3 chapters on there and peruse through it. Also, it's on Twitter or X with the same. I've got a link to it to go on there. Which it'll be the same as Facebook. One can look at it, and then also it's on LinkedIn with the same link, and also it's on Instagram, but it's only the link on Instagram. So there's a few places one can get it. Yeah.
We've been having such an interesting discussion. Our time is really almost up. When our listeners purchase a copy of the book, this is a book that they will keep. This is a book that will be a treasure. This is a book that you will sit down and read and think about, and then go back to it and read either the place that you just read again, or you'll go forward and read a little more. But eventually, you'll come to the very last page. They'll read that very last page. They'll close the back of the book, either electronically or physically. Peter, what do you really want the reader to take away from this scholarly, award-winning tome that you have written and researched for so much of your life?
Well, basically, for people who are interested in this subject, I feel that people who are interested in it are people who study. And in this sense, the book is a study aid. It's a reference work to keep going back to keep checking. And that's basically what I want people to do, is to check on some of the things that, some of the stories are going around about, that have gone around years about Jesus' miracles, and the text, a lot of even scholars say a lot of the texts contradict each other. When on closer examination, you find that they don't. They only enhance each other. So that's what I want the reader to understand, that it's a miraculous, the Gospels put together, even by the authors themselves, is a miraculous thing that happened. And still now one can grasp that through my book. And that's really what I want people to take away from it.
Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. I have enjoyed our conversation so much, and the book is just wonderful. Having the 4 texts right there together and knowing how much work you have put into this book, just thank you so much for being here. It's inspirational, and you are inspirational. Thank you so much for being my guest here on Books on Air.
Thank you so much, Susan. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
You've been listening to Books on Air, brought to you on the webtalkradio.net platform. Remember that the Gospel of Four, a unique conflation of the 4 Gospels into a single continuous narrative explicated by the author's commentary by Peter Boaz Jones, is available on Amazon. You can also hear this podcast on Apple, iHeartRadio, and Stitcher. Remember, keep reading, keep writing, and keep telling your own stories. Thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you so much for listening.